everybody. Hope you're having a good Monday so far. And if you're an Eagles fan, I know you are living today, as I am. We are just waiting for our chair to arrive, and hopefully we will start soon.
Good morning, all. Sorry for my tardiness.
We have quorum, Madam Chair. Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
I'm sorry, give me 1 second. Okay. I'm sorry, you guys. I am communicating with Dr. Bell. Okay. Good morning. I will officially call our meeting to order at 10:34. Thank you for your patience this morning. I was putting out a targeted housing crisis first thing this morning. So the world of targeted housing, when you have problems, you have to respond to them. So had me a little bit behind today. We will move to our second item on our agenda, which is approval of our minutes, and they went out on last week, and I will entertain a motion or any questions about the minutes from January 13th.
Madam Chair, I move to approve. Ms. Helen.
Second.
I second. This is Colleen.
Thank you. All those in favor, you can put yes to the minutes in the chat. All voting persons. And I am sure that carries. The next item on our agenda are the unsheltered numbers. And Nicole did get those out for us this morning. Colin, you wanna?
I do have those. And Madam Chair, I will say Chris Noblet put a note in the chat that he wanted to make a public comment. We don't have that on the agenda because it didn't come in. I'll defer to you if you want to allow 2 to 3 minutes for a public comment. I can do the numbers while you consider if you'd like, but
No, I think that's okay. Because item number 6 is gonna be very, very brief because I do not have the inner workings of a draft yet. But I'll leave some space for comments for about the tent distribution. So at this time, Mr. Norwood, you can present your public comment.
So he's got 3 minutes as our normal
3 minutes.
3 minutes public
Thank
comment.
you. Yes. Yeah, I'll be brief. I appreciate the time. Yeah, I just want to thank the committee for putting so much effort into creating the tint distribution policy. I've heard a lot of good feedback that this has, been kind of a change up for the kind of work that's been done in HSAC. So I appreciate that. I just want to ground us in the stakes that that this tint distribution policy represents. Everyone here is one paycheck or healthcare crisis from homelessness. It's not just about folks who are currently on the street. It's about everybody in Durham. And with Grants Pass coming and the laws that are criminalizing the homeless, the homeless are the front lines of the increasing poverty that is sweeping the country. So we're on a sinking ship and we need to throw out the life rafts and we got to build ships. But we got to have rafts to keep the people alive that are gonna actually live in housing we're gonna build. And I'm wrapping up my comment here. There's been this one narrative that's been going on here in Durham, and all across the country, frankly, that sounds something like there's not enough resources to meet 100% of the need, and that's our challenge. We've got X number of dollars and Y number of people, and unless there's millions of more dollars, it's going to be a problem that's going to keep going on. And that's very true in one sense because HSAC only gets, or the COC only gets resources allocated enough to barely provide enough services. It's not enough, as we know. But in other senses, it's not true. Like, we live in the richest country in human history. There are 27 empty homes for every person who needs one. In downtown Durham, we have a much higher apartment vacancy rate than the rest of the country. There are at least 2,500 empty luxury apartments just downtown. And by our counts, there's only, about 400 unsheltered people at any given time. So our scarcity is not material, it's political will. And I really challenge this body to challenge our city council, our state legislature, our federal government to fully utilize the resources that already exist. We don't have to wait for years to find a developer who wants to build a few dozen affordable apartments, that many will never be able to afford and only benefit a fraction of those who can. And thanks for letting me get this time here today.
Thank you very much for your continued appeals that we appreciate on what we need to do and how we need to move forward, and how I hope that we can move forward in the future, working collaboratively together to address the needs of our unhoused persons. We appreciate you, Mr. Norbert. Okay. Colin, you ready with the unsheltered numbers?
Yes, ma'am. 43 unsheltered families, 88 unsheltered singles by self-report, 20 families at risk of homelessness in the next 14 days, 30 singles at risk of homelessness, translates into 205 households, 394 individuals when you add all of those varying groups together. And last week we moved 3 families into shelter, one female into a shelter bed, and 12 males into beds. We had 3 exit shelter and call right back into coordinated entry, and 9 exited from rescue mission and called in. 4 from other counties, 0 from another country, and 1 who called coordinated entry and was not an appropriate fit for shelter. I dropped those numbers in the chat for you.
Any questions about any of that? Anybody?
About the inappropriate fit.
Was that Ricky? You asked a question?
Yeah, is that okay? 'Cause I could not.
Yeah, I wanted to make sure I heard it. It was kind of muffled.
Oh, sorry. I was asking for explanation, if available, on the client that was not a fit for shelter.
Would be Nicole.
Yes, I can answer that. She has oxygen tanks that her doctor stated, and the company said they will not um, send them. I guess they won't refill them at the shelter. So that is why she can't go to the shelter, because she cannot get her oxygen tanks refilled per the hospital and the doctor when they called in.
So I do have a because my eye of course went to that one on the list as well as another number that I was looking at. What happens when we get those people? What does coordinated entry do when they determine the person is unfit for shelter? Do we refer to someone else?
Yes, we tell the social worker or the nurse to call, because we can't do referrals, so we have them call Project Access.
Gotcha. And then is Sally on here? Sally,
Yes.
are we tracking that number? Like as far as like when you get them, or like do you accept them for service or just end up doing consultations in those matters? Are we tracking any of that?
We are not notified when, I mean, so I don't really know who that would be. Like, we get referrals from the hospital, and if we admit somebody into, medical respite and they're open on the entry point list, I would let entry point know, but it's not really a closed loop circle, because I don't know who's calling in from the hospital to entry point and who is not being accepted. So I can't really comment on that. I can only comment on the referrals that we get from the hospital.
So then Nicole, I have a follow-up question. We don't put any kind of message in HMIS when the person's unfit and we recommend Durham Homeless Care Transitions?
Yeah, we put it in the client note, but there is no service transaction. There's nothing that we put it in our note when we talk to the client and the social worker.
Colin, can we fix that?
Maybe.
I think, and the only reason why I asked is because I think this is very important. We need to really be intentional about tracking this number better and seeing it all the way through the process, so we know, so that we gather that data accurately.
So we would need to figure out how coordinated entry could refer to medical respite when they get these referrals. Like that is not an option at this point. Like my understanding is the medical respite needs to come through a different pipeline. So that's why entry point sort of says you need to call Project Access to go through that vetting process. There isn't a way to do that.
That's still.
Is there a way we can work on this? That's just my question. Is there a way that we can work on this, Sally, Nicole, Colin, so that we can track this process in whatever way we need to track it?
Yeah.
So just to clear, yes, Colin is right. We would not accept referrals direct from entry point. But if entry point wants to provide us with a list of HMIS IDs that they told the hospital to call us about, that's, I mean, then I would just be tracking where they entered into our program or not, which you could also see in HMIS.
Thanks, Sally. I just want to make sure that we're trying to figure out how we serve this group of people, because they still need to be served. It's just the how we serve them and making the connection so we can like illustrate that in the system. If some elected official or concerned community member wanted to inquire about how we manage folks that are medically vulnerable, I think we just need to figure out how we lay that out in a way that we can see it. There is a question in the chat, Nicole Lamb. So Ryan asked, do we know how many people exit from shelter back into being unsheltered?
So the answer is maybe. It really depends on how and who is doing the exit data entry into the HMIS, but yes, there is a place where it does capture how many people exit shelter to unsheltered locations. And that comes down to whoever's doing the exit interview and whatever the client tells them or the participant tells them they're exiting to. And then it's, the case manager's entering that data, whether it is not included on this report. That would be a separate report that I think we'd have to think about how we would run it and then make sure
You would
that.
have to ask UMD because they're the
Well,
ones that exit the clients from the
we could-
shelter. We just get the clients coming back to wanting to get back on the list to get on the shelter. So I can't really, I mean, I could look up how many people exited out of the shelter,
Well,
but go ahead.
we at CDD could run a report to report that out. I just want to make sure that the shelter providers know that we're going to be sharing all that data. And I got no problem running that report every week. It's not hard to pull a report to say, how many people exited from which shelter program to back out to homelessness. It might be something good to report on a monthly basis.
I mean, I imagine that they don't, I would imagine that a lot of people who are exited probably don't successfully complete an exit interview.
That's correct. There's a lot that go to unknown locations.
They just know they have to leave and they leave and they don't come back.
Mhm. Or people are taking a wild guess as to where they may be going, and it may be accurate, it may not be accurate. So, there are people who are listed as going to friend temporary, but then they're coming right back into the shelter like the next day. So part of it is kind of a part of it is not necessarily policy and planning. Some of that is a performance management committee
Right.
piece to be looking at.
And I think we typically look at it, but it's usually a point in time in the year that we look at it, and that's somewhere around August, September, right?
We look at it on an annual basis, yeah. In this committee.
Because I mean, the questions that you're asking, Ryan, are very important. But my office is like in the same building, so I see the bags. Every few days I see the bag, so I know that there are people that are definitely exiting, and I don't know if they're doing an exit interview, so I don't know how much accurate information we would get, but I think it is important. And I think the other thing to remember is that, we do have this 30-day emergency shelter process. And so it's contingent on people working on a plan and being compliant with that in the 30 days. And if there's no progress, and I don't know how they completely define that, I'm still not 100% sure, people are exited after their 30 days.
And if they miss curfew, they get exited also. So that's another
Absolutely.
compliance issue.
And I've sat down with many of those persons in my role here in the clinic. So I do think this is important information, and I don't know how. I guess I would defer to performance management on some of it. And I think, from performance management, if they wanted us to look at something from a policy and planning standpoint, then it would route back to us. Is that correct, Colin?
What's that?
If performance management would be looking at that more frequently than we would, and then if performance management had some concern that they wanted policy and planning to look at specifically, then they would route those questions back to us. Is that correct?
That's in theory, yeah. Like performance management sort of looks at how each agency is performing, and if they're seeing patterns and trying to see something that's like, this could be a policy issue that we need to shift. Like we're seeing negative outcomes or see something that's happening over and over again. There could be a policy that needs to be changed to help move the needle in the right direction again. And I think that's where, and Anthony's here sort of representing that committee. But we have been talking about looking at performance outcomes and being able to do regular measurements and doing some dashboards and things like that for how various interventions are working within the community.
Is that something policy and planning can encourage performance management to look at?
Yeah. I mean, they've got
It's
sort of
already
a
happening,
timeline.
yeah.
Yeah, they got a timeline. They're working on it.
And also, don't forget, performance management just went through setting the 2025 performance measures. And the first semi-annual evaluation will occur later this month or very early in March. And that information will be reported out.
I was just trying to see if we had anybody from UMD at this meeting, and I don't think I see anybody. I think we made that request in the past that somebody from UMD kind of be present, like in case we have UMD specific questions. I don't know if we need to go back and make another ask.
I will invite them again.
Thank you very much, because I think that's important just because of the questions that we're getting in the chat that we can't adequately answer. And then if it's something that policy and planning needs to do to help, like we've talked to them before about the medically vulnerable folks and trying to figure out how we build out something for persons who get in the door, and we think that they're able to manage the shelter, and then we find out that they're not. And so we really do need to have a UMD representative present at this meeting, if at all possible.
I will make the invitation.
Okay, thank you very much. Any other questions around the unsheltered numbers? This is something that we will be looking at. I see that Nicole answered Ryan's question in the chat. Yep. And I see your question as well, Drew. Can we just make sure you hold that question so that once we can get some UMD representation, maybe they can speak to the compliance and housing search process that they go through so we can get some clarity on it. Does that sound good, Drew?
Yeah, it sounds good.
Okay. All right, so we're gonna move to the next item on our agenda, which is a mid-year budget request for exigent needs to the homeless system. We've allotted 45 minutes to talk about this. The hope is that we can determine what must be funded prior to June 30th, 2025, and how much money is needed. And there have been some needs that have consistently come up, one being increased dollars for diversion funds and increase in emergency shelter capacity. But I would actually also add to that, like varied shelter options that speak to, the person with PTSD that just can't do congregate shelter, couples, pets. I think all of those things came up in those discussions, just to highlight some things. And then what I will definitely say before I open the floor is that what was clear from in our tent distribution listening section and working session was this need to, if somebody is tented in a place that they can't be and general services is asked to move them, where do they move them to? And I think we've been headed in this direction for a long time, as much as I cringe when I think about it, because our goal has always been to house people, not to prolong people's stay in an unsheltered situation. But I think that just kind of what we're seeing nationally across the board, and we don't see the lower level, the lower priced or affordable income kind of index growing like the $1 million units and the $500,000 units. It's just presented us with this kind of conundrum. I have nightmares at night about sanctioned encampments, while at the same time, just seeing the tents and seeing the general services truck over at the park, getting ready to move people whose only home is that one spot that they've made a home because they're outside. So I wanted to, and then also, the pre-housing task force has also done a lot of work around trying to make, a lot of work around making a request to city and county officials as well. And a lot of the things that they suggested in their report were things that we have talked about in depth in various circles within HSAC. But I think at this point, we've done the fiscal year 2026 request, and we know that, that is a ways off. We see that our numbers continue to grow, and we're not moving people out and into housing in an expedient way. So I would like to kind of open the floor for us to have a conversation on, if we made a request, what would we like to see in a request? And the suggestions that I have, I'm just going to give you guys what I think we should ask for. I think we should ask for subsidies to help people get into housing and maintain it, that act like a voucher, but are not. I think that a good other option, a good other suggestion or recommendation would be to increase diversion funds so that they can address some of the new people coming into the system. And then I think from our tent distribution perspective, and the fact that I think we are moving towards tents being one intervention in our continuum at the current time, we need to have a safe place for people to tent. We need to have a location that's identified so that some of these other things like pallet homes and a safe parking lot can actually be a reality, because I think in the past we've wanted to fund those types of projects, but I think the issue we kept running up with was no space, or no identified space that would be feasible for us to be able to stand some of those other options and opportunities up. So at this time, I will entertain from the committee some discussion around this, and then if we have persons that are not policy and planning members, please raise your hand. I'm going to do my best. If Colin, if you can help me to catch those. If people want to add to the discussion, we will also recognize you, and hopefully have a lively discussion about this request. I would like for us to do this quickly. I think the time is now, the urgency is now, and we need to be able to move forward with developing something to present to the HSAC to then be presented to city and county government. Thank you. Who wants to start? Do I have any persons that are not policy and planning meeting members who want to share? Ryan?
Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. I just wanted to speak to one of the last points you made, Shrita, about land. I have reached out to the director of the city's planning department and asked for a staff member to be assigned to support whatever group is doing this work, to think about land use, what publicly owned land might be supportive of this. And the director has written back and assigned someone that could be a support to whatever groups are going to be interested. If we want to look at potential public land, what land could support a sanctioned encampment. So I just wanted to let you all know that. I do agree with you, Sharita, that I think a priority, and we've had this priority for a while, that we have real shortages in our shelter system. And our, the responders that work for me every day are faced with that reality of meeting folks for whom our congregate shelter is not an appropriate place for them to go, and we have no place for them to go. So whether that be, I'm supportive of any option that is expanding and diversifying our shelter system to address the barriers that we have, whether that be sanctioned encampments, whether it be pallet homes. I think you named some of the barriers, whether it be couples, whether it be folks who are dealing with mental illness for whom a congregate setting is never going to be appropriate, whether it be folks who have animal companions that they're not going to part ways with. I think we fundamentally have to do better in that area, and we're going to need some new options. But if the challenge is space, then General Services has a project where they have been surveying a ton of land that's publicly owned. Budget Management Services has a separate project where they're looking at what are called paper streets. So I've been talking with those staff. I think that we can, through that work, identify potential land options, and then with planning staff and other staff, have them vet which ones would be maybe already currently zoned, or which ones are going to require additional zoning use. So I just wanted to bring that forward to you, Sharita, and to the group, if that's useful. But I do agree with you that whether that be an exigent, I don't know if that's possible, but it's something that we need, either need it now or in the next fiscal year. So thank you for highlighting that.
My hope is that we wouldn't have to wait to the next fiscal year, because I think we need it now. I think what I heard, the general services person that was at our working session spoke a lot about this. He was like, it's really sad. Like, but if they tell me I have to move it, I have to move it. And then my thing is, where do I move it to? Like, I kind of feel bad for throwing, having to throw somebody's stuff just away because they have nowhere to go. So I think that this is something that we really need to push our city and county government to supply, so that we can do some of the other things that are needed.
Yeah. Well, I agree with you. And I think, as you know, lots of other people do. That's why we have some proposals out there that are trying to help fast track some of this. So full support here. Thank you.
So, Colin, is there like a way that we can convene a smaller group just to talk to who the assigned person is?
Yeah, I had a phone call into Bo Dobrensky and planning. It sounds like Ryan reached out to the director. So Ryan and I'll get together and figure out who the staff person is. It's going to take some, like with anything, these are things that are not going to happen overnight. These are things that are going to take time to identify the properties, figure out how they're zoned, where they're located. Are they already promised to other things? So this is not going, we'll move as fast as we can move, but this is just part of a process where some of the general services lots have already been conveyed from general services to community development to build affordable home ownership opportunities. So it'll be like, okay, well, here's a great lot that would work really well, and it's downtown. Some of these lots may be perfectly usable, but they might not be near transportation. And that's a piece where you got to work with the transportation department to say, hey, can we do a new bus line that goes out to this place? So we can do all of it, and we want to do it. It's, we're going to work through it as expeditiously as we can, and we'll pull a meeting together with the planning folks and get everybody on the same path to find a solution.
I think this is an urgent need. It's an urgent need. It's an urgent need. So I feel like the people in planning, they probably have a way to kind of identify some places really quickly that could work. And I don't know when somebody's going to build on a plot of land or things like that, but I think depending on how we stand up something like this and how we work with people through the process as they come to a sanctioned encampment, it doesn't have to be a forever spot. That would be my hope anyway. Like, we're doing this so that we can service people in a more, a more expedient way. So my suggestion is that it's something that we press to say is overdue and we need it as soon as possible before fiscal year 2026 starts. So I have another hand. Chris.
Hey, yeah, going back to talking about this isn't exactly an exigent request, but maybe you know, a resourcing lubrication that could be proposed. You know, as far as I know, there's no restrictions for cities in North Carolina to tax vacant units. So potentially, we could request there to be you know, some tax or incentive that could kind of do two birds with one stone. You know, maybe help lower rent prices by making, you know, the people who own multiple units in the city or county to pay taxes on those empty units and have most of those funds going to address the housing crisis, the housing emergency that's going on. Because I'm sure there will be plenty of eyebrows raised about extra funds and everything. So just throwing that out there, that maybe that would be something to explore. I haven't actually looked to see if any groups are pushing for this in Durham or you know, other cities in North Carolina.
Thanks for that. I think that we've asked in the past some questions about what we could do to incentivize or create some social corporate responsibility kind of mechanisms in our city. I think something like that is probably somewhere in that realm of thinking. But thanks for sharing that information with us. And I did note it. Um, and yeah, I noted it. I got to figure out where it lives though, and who that ask is, or maybe it's, you know, time for us to kind of circle back around on the social corporate public-private partnerships, which I think was mentioned also in the report from the pre-housing task force as one of the solutions. Any other? I'm surprised that this conversation is not as lively as I expected it to be. Just because I think we all feel the strain and the pressure in our community about our ability to serve folks. So I'm definitely surprised. So is my understanding from the silence, Sally?
So I guess would you just sort of clarify what
So
we're
the
talking
idea is
about?
that we would send a letter, policy and planning would send a letter to HSAC to ask HSAC to make a mid-year request for funding and funding options based on what our conversation was today. The things that were in my mind were diversion funds, encampments, a sanctioned encampment space, and oh my goodness, what is the word? So housing subsidies, since we don't have vouchers, to help people afford units that are already out. So for example, people who may not be able to take advantage of some of the 30% AMI units right now that are coming online from the housing bond. If they don't have enough income and they can't get a voucher, funding would be available to them to support and make the unit affordable for them so that they could assume the unit. So what is the wording, Colin? I just can't think of the
Flexible
wording.
housing vouchers and
Yes.
supportive services.
Yep, flexible housing vouchers. So
So one thing to remember on the exigent needs request, it would be, this will equate to a one-time lump funding source. There's no guarantee it would continue after that dollar amount ends. Just make sure keep that in mind when you're asking for a one-time mid-year budget request. It's not an ongoing thing, needs to be part of an annual budget request. And if you anticipate these numbers, and that's going to be a question that will come back to me when this goes through the channels, is, well, how does this impact your FY26 ask? Because if this needs to continue going on, you're going to need to use your FY26 money to continue some of this. So just keep that in mind, that these are one-time expenses. When you're doing a mid-year budget request, you're asking for an exigent need for a specific period of time to get you over a hump, not for necessarily an ongoing piece.
Okay.
Unless the ongoing request was part of an ongoing budget request.
And so if we ask for a sanctioned encampment space to be identified,
that is
are
something.
you saying it would be?
So finding a finding a place where people can go, doesn't require money.
Gotcha.
Staffing it and making it a sanctioned encampment place does incur a budget allocation that may or may not be able to be a one-time or a long-time thing. So we just have to, just thinking it through, and this is based on my experience and questions that I get. I see Ryan has his hand up, and he may have a different
And Sally and Rich.
lens on it, just as a department director versus what I get.
I mean, I definitely feel like we need a space, and we need a space now.
And
I definitely feel like we need diversion funds, because we need to stop the influx of people coming in, because we already can't serve the people that are already here. And so the idea about the vouchers was to be able to make it affordable so that folks can take advantage of some of the properties that are opening up. But I guess if we did that, it would have to be some agreement for those people that when that funding dries up, you have the ability to afford the unit, which I don't know how is realistic now in my mind to request. I don't know. I don't know who was first. I think it was Sally, and then Ryan, and then Russ.
Well, I think this was the sort of the second half of my question, which is, so was the Policy and Planning Committee provided with the recommendations from the pre-shelter housing subcommittee? And are all the recommendations under consideration, or have you selected those items that you wanted to move forward?
So the agreement from our executive meeting was that we would bring that document to this body to begin a process of identifying what parts of the document we wanted to, and Ebony, you're on here, so you might need to help me on this, on what that vote was. I know that that document and recommendations from that document live in policy and planning to flesh out.
So I think the question, Sharita, and Sally, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think what you were asking is, has that document been shared or provided to policy and planning? Was that your question?
That's correct.
The
It
answer
has
to that
not.
is no, it has not, because executive committee was trying to determine what to do with it and whether Ebony was going to sign it or not. And that meeting didn't happen until like literally Friday. So that meeting happened on Friday, and we had this meeting today. So that document has not been sent to the full committee at this point. So the entire committee has not been briefed or updated on what is in that document.
And I'm sorry, because I kept referring to that document, and I just didn't even realize that this body had not seen it, or some people may have. I'm sorry.
Right, so that might explain some of the silence on the call if people aren't sort of aware of the different things that might need exigent funding. I would just say that.
Okay, so then my question, because we did talk about it on Friday, and that was something we did not add it to the agenda because we got the agenda out a week in advance. Because I'm trying to make sure that we get those things out so that we can prepare for conversations and people are not getting information at the last minute. We can disseminate that document to, can we get that to the Policy and Planning Committee today, Keisha?
Yes, we can send it out today.
So we could get that document out to the Policy and Planning Committee as a whole later on today. How would you guys like to follow up on discussion around exigent needs and that document? And this is for the Policy and Planning Committee.
Are you asking how or would we like to? Or both?
So the discussion in the executive meeting on Friday was that we were going to bring that document forward to Policy and Planning to look at, go through, in conjunction with this conversation, because I think this is one of the things I had on my short list when we started the conversation about the fiscal year 26 request. And that was before I knew that the pre-housing committee had the document that we just recently received and reviewed. So I don't want us to drag it out. We're already in February. And our numbers are not, our numbers are getting worse. And I think a lot of things we've dragged out. And I'm just trying to get us to a place where we're taking some action. So my question is, if we get it out to the Policy and Planning Committee today, how would the Policy and Planning Committee like to follow up on it? Do you want to review it and send questions? Do we want to convene a special meeting? Or do folks just want to take the time, review the document, and push it all the way into our March meeting?
Well, do we have?
Keisha, do you have the, okay, I think you.
Ryan, I think, is asking my question. Who is missing from Policy and Planning in this meeting today? Because I'm just asking, can we drop it in the chat, or we have to do it more formally than that?
The only people we have not that are on Policy and Planning that aren't here is Jason Brenner and Alicia Thompson, but everyone else is here. Sharita, Colleen, Ebony, Helen Tripp, Drew Wotan, Angela Holmes, Rosa Pierce, Samantha Smith, Abena, and Jay Nevin. If you're referring to that 41-page document, I don't have that.
I'm referring to the 41 page.
That was never shared.
She
with
doesn't
me.
have
I
it.
don't
It was
have
only shared with the executive team.
Gotcha.
I'm just saying that's something I can drop in the chat. Because some of the people that she just named are also part of that committee as well. I don't know if you wanted to do it that way, or you needed to, again, be something formally that's done and go through a process.
see. Ebony, do you have the 2-pager that has the chart on it? You know what I'm talking about? Not the whole 41 pages, but just the part where the recommendations were. We can, so Ebony does have it. We could share a screen. If Ebony has the short version, but the full document is 41 pages and will require you to do a bit of reading to get through. But if you wanted to look at the recommendations from that pre-housing group, we could put it on the screen now. I will say that many of the things that were there, well, Sally put it in the chat. So it was diversion funding, flexible housing subsidies, as I suggested, funding for medical respite, pallet homes, day shelter, and a sanctioned encampment was a part of the pallet home proposal. Those were the things, and a strategic plan were the recommendations from that body in summary. But I need to know how the committee would like to review that document. I think it might require a special meeting. But I don't want to say that if folks don't want a special meeting.
Can I ask a question about, I guess, a conversation going on in the chat and something that I was confused about from the exec meeting on Friday? Within, I believe, F, does that include, sorry, I'm flipping through my document now.
Oh my gosh, I don't even have my document in front of me.
Apologies to those of y'all who don't have it, but I was confused because I thought my understanding was that Appendix F included a sanctioned encampment piece. But I'm sorry, I'm kind of live checking.
No, so they called it a safe space or something. I think it was worded, but it was the same, it had the same meaning, and it was inside of that proposal. The problem we've had in the past is that we got a pallet home and a safe parking lot request in one of our last RFPs. We couldn't fund it or stand it up because the problem was we didn't have a parking lot or we didn't have a place identified for the pallet. And so we could not, even though many people on the entire executive leadership board wanted to put forward those projects, but the problem was the lack of a location, which is why I feel like we need to address the location piece first, because it also impacts tents. Folks keep asking us, like, if we have to move a tent, where do we move the tent to? Do we throw the people's stuff away? Like, how do we handle that in a compassionate, even more less traumatizing way than just taking a person's stuff and getting rid of it? These people are setting up their homes outside, and we're taking their stuff and throwing it away because there's nowhere for it to go. So yes, it was in that document. But I think we need the encampment first because that allows us to pilot a lot of things in a space if we have the space already identified. Okay. Does that answer your question?
I think I'm asking a different question. And this was a question I brought up in the exec meeting as well, just when we were talking about items B, C, D, E, and F. Were we referring to the appendices? Because Appendix E is about meetings and Appendix F is about, from the document I have, a different version, the subcommittee members. So I think for me, I just feel a confusion about what we what was decided to move forward from that exec meeting to discuss. But I think that could be honestly quelled by everyone just reviewing the document again who didn't have it yet and reconvening in a timely manner.
So if I may, Sharita, maybe
Go
I can
ahead.
bring some clarity. In the executive meeting, we as an exec team decided that we were going to bring the proposal over to policy and planning, and that we were going to look at appendix B, C, D, and E. And we were going to flesh it out. And I think that's what Sharita is saying. No one in this committee has access. Well, some of you do because you were a part of the executive meeting on Friday, but everyone in the meeting right now does not have access to the document. So we're trying to figure out what is the best way to get the information to everyone so that we can move forward with fleshing out B, C, D, and E. I can share my screen. This is the chart that was created that was sent over to the executive team before we actually met. This is not the 41-page document. This is just an overview. Can everyone see this? Yes, because I can no longer see y'all, so I don't know what you're saying. Can everyone see this?
Yes, we can see
We can
it.
see it.
Okay. So these are the appendix. So we, as the executive committee, said that we would take appendix B, C, D, and E. And that's what we will work on in the policy and planning. So I'll give you a moment to look at that.
Thank you, Ebony. I appreciate the clarity on those items.
No problem.
Ebony, I want to ask a question. Under entry point appendix C, it says 125,000, approximately 250K per month. I think that's supposed to be 25K per month. I'm not sure, but I want us to make sure that's clear.
That's
Right.
correct. It's supposed to be 25,000. It's in the body of the document. It's just a misprint there.
Thank you. Ryan's hand has been up, Sharita, for a while. I'm not sure if you saw it.
Okay, go ahead, Ryan.
Do you want me to stop sharing the screen or?
No, you can leave it there,
Okay.
I think.
I was just going to speak briefly to the exigent funding comment that Colin made. So Colin, one way I think about this is in the FY26 budget request, HSAC has put forward requests for new funding, right? 1.2 from the city, 1.2 from the county. I think of this exigent request, for example, if this group were to ask for funding this fiscal year to start something like a sanctioned encampment, yes, it would be one-time funding for this, but it could conceivably be connected up to the ongoing funding that comes in FY26 through that budget process, right? So
Correct.
Just naming that.
Yeah, and that's what I was trying to say is if you bring this in, it means that you're committing to that project as long as it lines up with the FY26. If you bring forth a project now that is not part of that FY26 budget request, it potentially would be a one-time, bolus of funding.
Yeah.
Without that.
I mean, some of this money could be one time though, just too, right? I mean, you could pilot a sanctioned encampment, and if the political will wasn't there, it wasn't working. It's not like we have invested a ton of money in infrastructure for which. So, I mean, that's something that we could do something for only a year is not necessarily in and of itself a reason not to do it and learn from it. So.
Yeah.
And that's also why I thought that, and I think I made this comment in the executive committee meeting, while I do know that a sanctioned encampment space was listed in one of the pilot strategies, I think just historically, the problem has been we don't have the space identified. And so I feel like if we get the space identified, we can pilot a lot of options. and opportunities, and we can figure out what works for our continuum best. But we need the space needs to come first. That's just what I believe, just to help us be successful with executing anything we decide to stand up. And so I was surprised to not see that in the body of this request, like just straightforward asking for encampment space.
I'll reply one thing there, Sharita. I mean, so I was in on these conversations. I think the reason that that isn't there is because my thinking is that if we're going to do that, if we're going to have a sanctioned encampment, my guess is what the manager and or council want to hear is that HSAC is in strong support of that. And so bringing forward a proposal that is endorsed by HSAC that says, we want a sanctioned encampment. We think it's necessary. We'd like it as soon as possible, which is what I think the proposal is attempting to do, and indicating in there that part of what HSAC is asking for is for the city and or county to identify currently publicly owned land or other land where this could sit. I think it's hard in the planning phase to identify land without strong political support for something like this, which is why bringing forward a proposal that it'd be hard for the proposal to have land identified right now. I think there's a role for HSAC to play in indicating that, yes, we think that an encampment, a sanctioned encampment, should be a part of our community's response. I think that helps pave the way for accelerating a process wherein we're able to identify potential public land where this could sit. So I agree with you. I just don't think, I think the one part where maybe I disagree is that that should already happen. And I think the proposal specifically requests HSAC as one of their requests to the city or county, assigning staff and helping identify land where something like this could exist, and maybe having an RFP process begin while that process goes, because that could take some time. But there's no reason to think that we can't find, there's a lot of publicly owned land that we can't find land to do this, but it will take, I think, strong support from HSAC and then support from elected leaders and others to do that. So my 2 cents.
So I think what I'm hearing from you, Ron, is that you agree that we need an encampment. You just may not agree with the way in which that comes about. Is that what I'm hearing?
Well, so I'll try to say, so my opinion is that, yes, we need a sanctioned place along with some other options that we write for, given that we don't have enough shelter space, we don't have the right kinds of shelter space, and we certainly don't have enough housing. So yes, I think that we need an encampment. 2, I think that that process could be, I guess the one thing that I'm disagreeing on is that we have to know the exact piece of land right now before HSAC, before this group, of which I'm not a voting member, before we all to say, we want to move forward a proposal for a sanctioned encampment. And we note that land has to be identified, but that land needs to be identified by city and county staff. I think the most important thing that this group can do is say that this group of leaders thinks that a sanctioned encampment should be a part of what the city and county are doing, and is asking city and county staff, in addition to funding, to finding space for such an encampment to operate on. I think we can do that work apart from that, but I think a very clear position by the part of HSAC makes it much easier for staff to be directed to find that land and to find it in a timely manner. That's what I'm saying.
So I actually think we agree. So I actually think that
but I think the proposal, that's what I think the proposal was doing. That's where I think we disagree in how we read the proposal. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. So how do we want to go forward with this? It's a lengthy document. I don't know of a 30-minute session. I would think that you would need to allot an hour to 90 minutes, honestly, for the document. Because I think from executive position, like, we kind of talked about, we broke it down from the strategies and the pilot discussion first. I think there was also additional questions in the content of some of the appendices and proposals that we could flesh out and further develop. Because like I have questions in a lot of those things in those areas, and I think some of my other executive committee members have questions for that part too. And so if the will of the policy and planning committee is to endorse that document, I think that there's still work that needs to be done to make that document stronger. So my question is, do we want to get this to you guys and then set up a special meeting to go through the pre-housing shelter subcommittee proposal?
I'm in favor of that.
Russ?
I would support that. And I also think, and I'm not sure how to word it, I think there needs to be some, I don't know if it's a rubric or we need to know how much these need to be fleshed out, because I think back, Shrita, to your point a moment ago, you and Ryan discussing like what needs to be ready for proposal. I think the idea is that what comes out of this committee doesn't need to have land attached to it. But if an agency is going to come forward and say, we'd like to do that, there should be actual plans that involve land, just as an example. And so I think you may need to provide guidance on how in-depth we're going into each of these proposals in terms of what has to come from this committee versus what any agency or organization that was stepping forward to do them, what they would need to fill in. Because saying we're interested in encampment and really endorse the idea, to Ryan's point, is really important. This group fleshing out like where it's going to be, not so much. I mean, any group that's going to step up to say they'll do it, they should be able to show up with either in partnership with the city, the county, or private land, the land for it.
Right, but what I know from our past experiences is that we were very excited about some of the proposals that we got this last time, and projects that we unfortunately could not move forward on because things like the land part or the space part were not identified, so it was very difficult to do. And
Right.
so
But you're kind of making my point. If an agency shows up wanting to do a project, they should have a fully fleshed out
right.
plan, including
And if
land.
it's not, we can't fund it. So that's why
Right,
I feel like an
right.
endorsement from HSAC saying we need an encampment is the way to go, because then the project can just propose to use the space in X way.
The other thing contextually, I mean, and I'm not sure how to introduce this, Shrita, but the world is not as it was 6 weeks ago.
I understand that.
And having gone through the funding freeze concerns, we've had no outreach from HSAC or from the lead agency about any kind of contingency planning or what we're thinking through. I'm just curious what the plan is for having conversations about the threat of losing $2 or $2.5 million is, because exigent needs may become keeping people housed that are housed, but I mean, we're running our own contingency plans. We're meeting with HUD this afternoon. I'm just kind of curious what from HSAC and from the lead agency, what the thoughts and leadership are going to be in that realm. I feel like that affects this conversation a lot.
Colin, I'm ready for you to jump in, but I will definitely, I believe that community development is probably having conversations within community development, and I don't, Ebony, you can speak to this. I don't know if I know that I haven't had any conversations with community development staff about if funding should freeze, stop, whatever. This is what we have. This is what we don't have. So, and now Colin.
Sure. So yes, conversations have begun on contingency planning, and it's a little bit more complicated from just a global city side. because HUD is not the only federal source of funding that comes to the city. There's also Department of Transportation. There's also a bunch of other departments. So it's kind of like trying to get your head wrapped around all the different things that are impacted, not just the homeless system. So yes, we have started having some of these conversations, very early stages of contingency planning. But one of the things that I'm in the process of pulling together are documentation of how much money, how many people are impacted and in each of these programs that are funded through HUD, COC grants, ESG grants, pulling that data together to be part of a larger discussion and contingency planning.
But I mean, I hope you can understand the concern that we're having this conversation. This is not on the agenda. We've heard from NAEH, we've heard from NCCH, we've heard from 4 of our private funding partners, all asking questions that the lead agency has not come to us. We're already looking at suspending some things because one of the contracts ran out in January.
Mm-hmm.
And spending money on so I'm just like, I understand there's all these complexities, but when is the rubber going to meet the road and we're all going to get together and try and figure this out? I don't think we're looking to you to plan it all or yeah.
Right. And part of that is you got to remember, I've got several layers of conversations that have to happen before I can just come out and be like, hey, we're contingency planning and here's what we are. I need to make sure that people above my pay grade are aware that we're contingency planning. And sort of, okay, what are the next steps? And the step that we're at right now is collecting all of the data. And like we have all of the contract values. We know all the contract start dates for all of the ESG money, all the COC money, and have the data that we can pull together. So we're working on it. I don't have a final solution yet or a meeting scheduled to discuss next steps because I don't know what the powers that be would like the next steps to be, because it's not just a Colin decision or a homeless team decision. It's a little bit of a bigger picture than that. But it is something that is very high on our priority list and high on our radar that we are working as quickly as we can through this.
So is there a plan, Colin, to have a meeting with?
Like I said, once I get more information to some powers that be, I had a conversation with a deputy city manager last week about this, and he was explaining some of the other factors of this, which impact not just the homeless system, but all the other pieces, but it's trying to pull all the data together so that it's part of a bigger plan. And maybe that's something that the HSAC executive committee would want to, or HSAC would want to be advocating on at this point, is having a discussion about ensuring a contingency plan is put in place. I mean, it's going to happen regardless because it has to. Because I'm just as worried as anybody else that HUD will choose not to fund contracts that were announced on January 17th. Because Lord only knows what's going to happen.
Thank you, Colin.
Sorry, I don't have a more specific answer at this point, but this is what I know as of now.
Our meeting is scheduled to be over at 12.
Yes, ma'am.
It's 11:45. What is the will of the policy and planning committee as it relates to reviewing this document?
This is Samantha. I'll just state my position again. I'm in favor of having a special meeting soon after people have had time to review.
Okay. You want to make it a motion? You're on policy and planning, right, Samantha?
I am, yes.
Okay, that's what I thought.
Yeah, I move that we have a special meeting at a date to be determined after we review this.
Can I get a second?
I'll second Samantha's motion.
Who was that?
Russ.
Russ. Okay, so I'm gonna call for the vote, but then that means we need to come up with a date. So we have a motion on the floor to quickly have a special meeting to review the pre-housing pre-housing task force subcommittee. I think that's the right name. Document in a special meeting. All those in favor, please vote in the chat, yes and no. All right, that carries. Now, when are we meeting? And are we meeting via Zoom? Or you guys wanting to meet in person? What are we doing?
How does Thursday the 13th work?
Thursday this week, the 13th.
Got enough time
Do
to,
folks feel like they can review the document for the folks who haven't seen it at least once in that time?
There's a performance management meeting on the 13th from 10 to 11:30 a.m. So just keep that in mind.
We're looking at the afternoon.
There's a PSH rapid rehousing meeting at 2 o'clock.
You said performance management was from what time?
10 to 11:30. And the by name list meeting is 2 to 3.
Could we do 11:30 to 1?
I could do that.
Does that work? Ebony's out of the office on the 13th. So the 13th is not gonna work.
I
Okay.
apologize. She tore her ACL, so I have to be there. She can't drive right now.
That's okay.
Look at Friday the 14th, or do you want to look at the next week?
Oh, let me look at Friday. So we have, okay, wait a minute. I'm sorry, I gotta pull up my calendar, my life calendar here. Let's see. I am open from anywhere from 9 o'clock to 1 on the 14th. If the 14th works. Otherwise, I would say the 17th in the morning. Like maybe the same time as this meeting is, 10:30 to 12, something like that. And if we don't take the whole 90 minutes, at least we blocked it. Oh, I can't do the 17th. Take that back. Looking at my other calendar. So I can't do the 17th.
Do I have to be present for the meeting? Because if it works for everyone, I would hate to move it if that works.
Well, you are not the only one that's not available that day.
You need to make sure you have a quorum if you're going to be making any motions from that meeting.
How many people are needed for the quorum? Or is it just depending on how many people actually show up to the meeting?
It's how many actual members are there. You gotta have Was it 2/3?
Isha, what's our
Plus
quorum
one,
number?
2/3 plus
for,
one.
yeah,
Okay.
2/3 plus one. So if it's a full body, you would need 7 members present.
So we need 7.
If 12 show up.
I could do the 18th before 12. I could do the 19th between 11 and 1. I could do the 20th anywhere from 9 to 1. Oh, but I would rather not do that because we have our draft session for the 10th distribution on the 21st. And I don't know if I'm going to have a conversation with Dr. Battle before that meeting on the 21st. More than likely, because I don't have an updated report for her from our working session on last week. How many people were not available on the 13th? Let me go back and see. So my conflict always, you guys, is that my clinic is open from 1 to 5. It's very difficult for me to be away from the clinic between 1 and 5. So
So
mornings are
Sharita,
going
there's
to
some
be
energy on a 10:30 to 12 meeting on 119 happening in chat. Does that work for you? It's before 1.
the 19th. Go to the other calendar.
2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
So I have a meeting from 10 to 11 with UMD on the 19th. So I would be available after 11 o'clock.
But Sharita, it looks like no one else responded when you asked who's not available on the 13th. It looks like it's just me.
No,
So if it's
it's
just
Helen.
no, she's out of the office on the 14th.
I think the ones other
Oh yeah, she is.
after
Not until
only
She's
one.
available
not
in the
available.
afternoon.
Yeah.
Not the
It's
one.
just
Yeah.
afternoon,
Yeah.
so it's not available in the morning.
Can we, the 19th, I would not be available until 11 o'clock. I need to have that UMD meeting.
What about, sorry, what time did we say for the 13th? Would 11 to 1 or noon to 1 be sufficient, or do we think we need more time than that on the 13th?
We have what? How many policy and planning members, Keisha? 12?
12.
So 2/3 plus 1 would be
7.
7. And Ebony and Helen would not be there.
That's half plus 1. 2/3 plus 1 would be 9. So I'm trying to figure out if it's actually half plus 1 that we're talking about.
It's 2/3 plus 1.
Okay, 2/3 of 12 is 8.
It's how many?
8.
I actually think it's half plus 1. That's what I've been told. Not sure where the 2/3 is coming from. That may be.
I thought it was 2/3. That's what I thought it was.
It's half plus 1.
Half plus 1. So 7. So then that is 7. I mean, I think we could go forward with the 13th. Because we will only be missing two persons. Do we have any of our policy and planning members that are not on the call today? Who's missing?
Yeah, Jason, Brenner, and Alicia. Who on the call, who on the call could make it that are policy and plan? If you've got 7 on the call right now, you're good.
For 2 of those won't be available. Helen and Ebony. That's
Okay,
what
so
I'm saying. I was trying to make sure that we can make that up with the others.
And Jason's an attorney, depending on what he has in court.
So are y'all saying I can to the 13th? Is that what we're saying?
Yeah,
What time's on the 13th?
11:30 to 1? Or 11:30 to 12:30? I don't know. I like the 90 minutes.
Block it for the 90 minutes. And
And
if you
then
don't use it all, you can leave early.
Right.
Policy and planning.
Sharita, I have shared the documents with Keisha and she'll get them out to make sure that everybody have them, okay?
Gotcha.
We'll post the meeting and get it sent out today, since we've got to give 48 hours notice.
Yep. It's got to go out today.
Can you do that for us, Keisha? And make sure we get the notice to the clerks as well.
Yes, and are we confirming 11 to 1 on the 13th?
11:30 to 1.
11:30 to 1, got it.
All right. So we have 2 minutes. That's when our meeting. So item number 6 is the update on our tent distribution policy, and at this time I don't have an update. I am going, after this meeting, I'm going to try to connect with Dr. Battle to follow up with her. She was working really hard for our 21st deadline and doesn't have anything for us today, and she had a car accident. So she's okay, but just moving a little bit behind right now. So I do apologize that we don't have anything to share today, but we will have something on the 21st, and I'm gonna see if we can get it out to you guys before the meeting so you can review it before the 21st. So that way, if you have any questions, concerns about the draft, we can address them in the meeting in real time and try to make those corrections. Is that okay with everybody? I don't hear anybody. So I see Ebony shaking her head. Okay, we'll do that. Kylie, you don't have 5 minutes, but if you guys want to hang on for a couple minutes, can we just do an update on the Forever Home Durham units? You're muted.
Yeah, we're in the process of working out details for referrals to Hardy Street and need a different MOU with Cedar Trace to get their commitment of units. But we have made contacts. Cedar Trace property managers are excited. We just need to work out the MOU of how many units are at Cedar Trace. Jeff and the team have been meeting with Hardy Terrace and Hardy Street, sorry. And Jeff, jump in and correct me if I'm wrong. Understanding is the first few units, there are 3-bedroom units, and we've had some families that are on the PSH waiting list. So the goal was to try and get those folks into those units to get them off the list. And they may need to have rapid rehousing for a minute until those PSH slots become fully available, but it would at least get them housed. Jeff, I don't know if you want to add to that or if I misspoke.
No, that was correct. That is the process now, and the referrals have already started. Well, the process has already started. I have to give the CE committee access to the smart sheet today, and they'll be able to go ahead and do the referrals starting today. So they'll be receiving an email indicating that they have access to the referral portal today, and they can do referrals. And that is correct. The first building, which is building 2, is 3 bedrooms, and then the second building should be online 2 weeks later, and that is 1 and 2 bedrooms. And then they're gonna phase in the buildings, but we get notice on those as they become available, and I'll share. Thank you.
Any questions?
Where there are none, it's 12:02. I will entertain a motion to adjourn until the 13th. And Keisha will get the documents out to you today, the announcement out to you today, and the Zoom link out to you today. And just be prepared to have a discussion on the items we have identified.
I'll make a motion to end our policy and planning meeting.
Alrighty. Do I have to say? I always wonder if I have to second that motion. Do I?
I second it. This is Samantha.
All right, second by Samantha. All is well. If everybody's in agreement, you can log off. Have a great week. See you Thursday.